Alan Calder. I'm your host for this afternoon, and I'll be talking to you for the next 45 or 50 minutes or so about cybersecurity and how you can go about dealing with today's cybersecurity issues. I'm the founder and executive chairman of IT Governance. We're the world's one-stop shop for cybersecurity, products, services, consultancy, training, whatever it is that an organization needs to address their cybersecurity issues in whatever way is appropriate for them. It's our delight to provide. And the challenge that organizations have today is that wherever you are in the world, wherever you're connected to the internet, and the world is now a massively connected place, so there are going to be hackers who are equally well connected. They can be sitting in Patagonia at the tip of South America, and you can be safely in the middle of Europe, and they can log on to your network and access data if you've made it possible for them to do so. The reality is that cybercrime is already widespread. The United States is the greatest source of cyber criminal activity, China following rapidly behind, Germany in the third place, Britain in fourth. But the reality is that you find cybercrime taking place in most countries around the world. And the reason for it starts with the insecure approaches that most of us adopt to data. Passwords, for instance, 71% of all passwords that are used by people appear on the top 500 standard password list. 40% of all passwords are on the top 100 list, and that includes favorite passwords like password, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So the reality is that if you want to break into somebody's laptop, workstation, or online account, you don't necessarily need a sophisticated and complicated dictionary hacking tool. You just need to know what the top 100 passwords is, and in 4 cases out of 10, you're going to be in pretty quickly. Serious organized crime goes a lot further than just hoping to be able to break in. Serious organized crime groups around the world are now into a whole range of different activities, not just slavery, not just gun running and drug running, but online crime is a perfectly effective way for them to operate, and much less dangerous than something involving human presence. According to the Europol, cybercrime is now highly sophisticated, commercially professional, very effective, operating beyond the rule of law, and because it's beyond the rule of law, it's policed only in the way it wishes to be policed. And as a result, cybercrime losses have doubled in the last 2 years and are expected to continue going up. Criminals target the same type of assets all the time. Commercial information ranging from intellectual property through customer lists, business and commercial strategy, and financially sensitive information to useful data like banking information or payment card details, personally identifiable information. You can buy on the web lists of payment card numbers that are still valid for less than £1 a pop. And the main loser, this is according to a National Audit Office audits in the UK from cybercrime, is business. In the year 2010-2011, something like £21 billion worth of losses to Britain. Computers aren't secure. We carry around within our pockets the same computing power that used to be adequate to run a whole business just 10 years ago, and the volume of phones lost and stolen in London every week or stolen in the UK last year is very high. The resale value of phones is between 10 or 60 pounds. In the US, 113 phones are lost or stolen every minute, and the reality is that when someone steals your mobile phone or you lose it, you not only lose access to information, but you lose a device that contains information about all your contacts, perhaps email access to your network, and to a whole range of commercial information. Mobile phones, easiest and quickest route to steal information from organizations. Networks and websites are vulnerable. Across the last 6 penetration tests that our penetration testing arm carried out on clients, we found that there was an average of 19 high-level vulnerabilities and an average of 26 medium-level vulnerabilities. Medium means that the attacker can get some control over the data held on the system, and a high-level vulnerability is something which enables the attacker to get full control over the system or make the system unusable to those who are authorized to use it. Average number of vulnerabilities. In other words, organizations have, without being aware of it, high levels of holes, high numbers of holes that hackers can exploit. Competitors, perhaps. Hackers certainly take advantage of these. So this here is a transcript of a conversation that took place across a live chat functionality recently between a hacker and a client of ours. The hacker came on and said, I've taken your website down. I've stopped it because your competitor gave me some money to do so. Please get me your manager. The manager came on board. Joined the live chat, and the hacker said, you give me money, I'll let you have your website back, and of course refused to do anything other than that. Luckily, our client had effective resilience and backup processes in place. They're able to recover their site in under 3 hours and get back and working. Imagine an organization where 3 hours is worth many £1 million worth of revenue across your website, or where damage to your website brings significant reputational negative impacts. You don't have to be an engineer to be a good hacker. You can simply download a tutorial on the internet. So you're interested, for instance, as this particular tutorial shows, into hacking credit cards. Sometimes you just want to buy stuff for yourself. Other times you want to buy and sell stuff. It's quite straightforward. Here's a tutorial how to hack a VP ASP card. And what it points out very clearly is that all you have to do is find a vulnerability. In other words, hackers aren't looking for your business, they're looking for vulnerabilities. And where they find vulnerabilities, they'll break in. They're not particularly fussed if you're a small organization turning over £1,000 a day or a large organization turning over £1,000 a second. If you have a vulnerability, they'll exploit it. And the exploit code and how to deploy the exploit code is freely and easily available to anybody who wants to do it. If that's too much of a hassle, you can use a fraud as a service option. So Citadel is an example of a piece of malware which has been available. It's been through a number of upgrades. It's been available on a fraud as a service, or FAS basis. It's got dedicated CRM. You can raise issues. It's got a support package. It's very good at support. You can ask for new modules to be developed. All of the things that you think of being normal around software in the legitimate world is perfectly normal around fraud as a service software, and you can rent it for a period which is appropriate for the crime that you're seeking to commit. Fraud is very easy on the internet. Social media is a ongoing source of information. If you're a hacker and you want to be able to break into somebody's personal online resources, and you need access to information like their birth date or their mother's maiden name or their dog's name, it'll be on one of the multiple social media sites that most people use. The only way to avoid exposing any of your data to a hacker, of course, is not to use social media, which in today's terms often means simply not being connected. More and more hackers are focusing on hacking the human. The intersection between technology and data is the human being who inexpertly uses both. And again, you don't have to be a brilliant hacker, because you can buy a book called Hacking the Human. It tells you what types of techniques to use and walks you through them. Or if you're looking at making an online attack using scam email, you can download a social engineering toolkit which has got within it all of the things you need to craft and deliver effective phishing emails. We're all, we think, quite used to what a phishing email looks like. A phishing email looks as though it's come from the bank or financial institution we're asking for, but nowadays the spelling is an awful lot better than it used to be. They come in slightly smaller numbers than they used to, but nevertheless, with a bit of careful training, you can spot the fact that there is a folder attached, a zip file, and you know, because you've been trained properly, that if you click on the zip file, it'll download some malware to your network. However, what you won't necessarily spot is a spear phishing attack. A spear phishing attack is something which really looks exactly like an email from somebody that you know and trust. And it might well come by means of an effective man-in-the-middle attack, or it might come because the attacker has been able to infiltrate and take over the network of one of your suppliers and use the supplier to send you an email. And as in this example, a piece of text which says that Jeff, somebody whose name you recognized, has sent you, and you recognize Armando as well, a report regarding new threats. Can you take a look at it? You're very likely to click on that. This is an actual phishing attack, and that downloaded an actual piece of malware onto the client network, and the client didn't realize it. Spear phishing is a very effective method of putting malware onto a network. And remember that most firewalls are designed to catch bad stuff coming in, and so if they can download a piece of malware onto your network which is very tiny, isn't spotted, and which then sends out a message telling the host on the far side of the firewall to prepare to receive data, you're unlikely to pick that up. Infected websites are another way that organizations get malware onto your website. Take over a legitimate website for a short period of time, upload malware onto it so that when you go and look at your own bank, it downloads in a drive-by attack some malware that you didn't want. It might ask you to upload personal information as you log in. You should be able to recognize that it's probably not genuine because it doesn't have an HTTPS in front of the URL of the website, but most people wouldn't recognize that. So the reality is that hackers can get formal qualifications. Everything that you need to be a successful hacker is freely available on the internet. The code's available. The bugs and holes and vulnerabilities you're going to take advantage of are listed on top websites run by legitimate organizations and listed to help legitimate organizations know what bugs they have to patch. The attackers can get the same information, work out what to attack, and go and do it. And if you're patching things very slowly, they'll be into your network using automated search for vulnerability tools before you realize it. And then we have the Internet of Things, the idea that we should have fridges and pacemakers and motor cars with chips in them, which we can access remotely via our mobile phones, and therefore access remotely via an attacker's set of hacking software. If the Internet of Things isn't enough, there's the dark net. The internet, it's very easy to go and buy things that you shouldn't buy, going to a website using something like the Tor browser, which is freely available from the torproject.org website. That's the URL you see in front of you right there. And it's designed so that people who install and use the Tor browser can't be tracked by security services when they're surfing the net. That's good for people who don't want to be tracked by their governments. It's also good for criminals who don't want to be tracked by anybody. And it's a means by which you get onto websites like the Silk Road, now in incarnation 1, 2, and all the rest, where you can buy heroin, guns, people, credit cards, usually using a Bitcoin, assuming that your Bitcoin still has some sort of value. And then, of course, there are lots of sites that have been around for a while. This particular site where you can buy credit card details and hacking and attacking devices is now happily in its 16th year of helping organizations break into blackjacks, cracking safes, cheating at baccarat, picking locks, all the rest of it. It's been going on for a long time. If you go onto the internet and think that you're in a safe environment, or you're in a safe environment where nobody will notice you, you're wrong. The internet is a bit like one of those deeply unsafe townships, which is packed full of folk whose only method of survival is theft, and you park your brand new shiny motor car on the road, and you leave it there with the boot open, the keys in the ignition, the window down, and your sat nav on the dashboard with your home address punched into it. If you walk away for 10 minutes, come back, expect to find your car, You won't, and if you manage to get home, you'll find that the guys already got there and cleaned home out. That's really what the internet is like. Uh, and and on top of the fact it's packed with cyber criminals, you have the challenge of cyber warfare. We see cyber attack as a normal part of any normal method of attack, and that's not least because critical national infrastructure is based on computers with SCADA systems and similar. So if anybody's going to mount an attack on a country, they're certainly going to up front have a go at breaking down the systems on which you depend. The idea of an advanced persistent threat is now becoming more broadly understood in the information security community. It's something which is driven by a nation-state level attacker because it is sophisticated. It's designed to put a number of pieces of malware on your network and to sustain them there over a period of time so that they can steal information usually commercially valuable information, compromise your system and defenses when necessary. And advanced persistent threats are designed not to be found. If you think that you're immune, that probably means that you already have a number of pieces of APT malware already on your network. Cybersecurity has become such a significant issue now that Her Majesty's government in the UK identified it as a Tier 1 risk back in 2010 and created a cybersecurity strategy which was about making the UK more resilient to cyber attack, and that is driving an awful lot of the activity in the UK. That doesn't mean we're winning. In fact, as I said earlier, 44 million cyber attacks in the UK in 2011, somewhere between 18 and 27 billion pounds worth of losses through cybercrime, and according to the National Audit Office, 80% of them could have been prevented through basic security hygiene, leaving the windows up, the boot locked, no keys in the ignition, and a guard to keep watch on the car. 93% of large organizations and 76% of small organizations had a cyber breach last year, with an estimated cost of between £15,000 at the bottom end of a small organization and £250,000 at the top end for a larger organization as being the cost of loss. Significant losses for organizations to experience each time there is a cyber breach. The message is the same around the rest of the world. 855 incidents in 2012 with 174 million compromised records. 79% of those attacks were victims of opportunity, and 96% of them were not highly difficult. Most, 92% of incidents discovered by third parties, which can be highly embarrassing when your customer phones up and says, "Did you know that the website that you told me to go to has been hacked?" And so the stakes are high. You have commercial information at risk. You have therefore potentially direct financial loss to suffer. There are fines that might come from legal and regulatory bodies. There's loss of reputation. There is potential indirect loss from recovery and remediation costs. There's possibly, in a number of jurisdictions, class actions against directors. And there are cases of companies where they've been successfully cyber attacked and they've been unable to survive the cyber attack and have gone out of business. Not surprisingly, therefore, organizations are beginning to look at their supply chains and saying, we want information about what's happening in our supply chain. We want proven cybersecurity credentials in our suppliers, and many of those companies therefore are saying they've been asked about it. Cybersecurity framework is where you have to start if you're going to deal with cybersecurity effectively. The cybersecurity framework is going to depend on some form of effective cyber resilience, coordinated, integrated preparations for recovering from a wide range of possible attacks. And for that, you need a strategy, you have to have a management system, and you have to deal broadly with defense continuity and recovery. Yes, that requires money. Remember, 80% of breaches could be prevented through basic cyber hygiene. When thinking about a cyber resilience or cybersecurity framework, there are really two things you want to be thinking about. The first is making sure that you're not simply addressing technology. Cybersecurity is not just about the right hardware and software. It's about people who know how to configure it, and it's a process which ensures that it's configured right. Most cybersecurity frameworks look only at the technical aspect. You need to address the people and process ones as well. And you also need to make sure that there's an appropriate balance between confidentiality, availability, and integrity of information. And availability of information, the right of people who are authorized to use information to access that, is as important as is protecting confidentiality and integrity. It's increasingly clear that the only standard internationally to which organizations can turn is ISO 27001. It's a globally recognized standard and best practice framework for dealing with information security. And so I'm going to be talking now over the next 5 or 10 minutes about ISO 27001 as the backbone of an approach to driving cybersecurity through your organization. And the reason for that is that ISO 27001 is certainly the basis for all the UK's information security standards, connecting to any one of the government pieces of government infrastructure. It draws on international best practice and recognizes that all companies are likely to be different. They have different risk appetites, different way of assessing risk, and that's an appropriate way to do it. For those companies who want to go beyond simply deploying best practice, there is a certification scheme, which means that you can have an independent audit and assessment. There are 10 steps to cybersecurity, and this 10-step program is also one which is recognized by HMG government in the United Kingdom, and 5 of the components are now going to be part of what the UK government will call the basic cybersecurity hygiene profile, which will be launching early in spring. So the 10 steps to cybersecurity starts with information security governance and risk management. And I'm going to talk you through each of them to the basic endpoint, the starting point, if you like, for continual improvement, which is testing, monitoring, and reporting. Information security governance is the starting point. Remember that 12% of the worst security breaches were partly caused by senior management giving insufficient priority to security, and in a survey that was done recently, 26% of respondents hadn't briefed their board on security risks in the last 12 months. So the question is, how effective is your IT governance structure? How effective is your board at identifying cyber risk and allocating appropriate resources to reduce and control cyber risk? Do you have the appropriate policies, and have you got adequate cyber insurance in place? Having the board on board with an appropriate risk management framework, the first thing you should then be looking at is securing your perimeters. Securing your perimeters means all of your websites, internet gateways, internet connection points, and making sure that you've protected them against internal and external attack with appropriate firewalls, and that you've tested them through a regime, an ongoing regime of penetration testing. Do you know whether you can filter out unauthorized content? Do you know whether you can test security controls? The current level of vulnerabilities and vulnerability exploitation suggests that if you're not testing internet access points every quarter, you're needlessly exposing yourself to repeated theft and breach. 98% of information security breaches, remember, involved external agents, with 81% of them involving hacking. And ladies and gentlemen, just to remind you, there will be an opportunity at the end of this to pose questions. Do use the question function in your chat box in the dashboard to pose questions now. I'll pick them all up as we come to them. You can use either the questions or the chat function. I'll pick questions up from those. Step 3 is to apply secure configurations. Configuration you can think of as having 2 steps. The first is, have we worked out what we should have built into applications and into our servers? Should we allow guest access or not? And there are, for every form of server software and application, a secure configuration available, so that you can make sure that all of the things that make it easy, all of the aspects that make it easy for people to use the application or access the data are closed in line with your acceptance of risk. That's the first thing to do. Make sure that you securely configure devices, you get rid of default passwords. Make sure that you know where all your devices are. You might have an inventory of devices and a defined baseline build for them. And then you patch them. Whatever software you've got on your applications, whatever application software you've got deployed is going to be have new vulnerabilities identified from time to time. So you need a patching regime which is applied on a continual basis to ensure that maximum security is achieved. And continual basis doesn't mean putting a patch in place 2 weeks after it's been released, because the point it's released is in answer to the identification of a vulnerability, and you have to work on the basis that the hackers are aware of all vulnerabilities, certainly no later than the point at which you become aware of them. 79% of hacks were opportunistic, 96% of them were not highly difficult. Having secure configurations and a working patching regime is a basic part of effective cybersecurity. And that's also why they're part of the government cybersecurity hygiene, patching and secure configurations. 4 is updated malware, anti-malware defenses, the third step in the government cybersecurity hygiene. Do you have an anti-malware policy in place? Do you deploy anti-malware software across all of the devices in your network? Do you continue to scan the network internally to make sure that adopted policy and best practice is in place? The reality is that even network administrators can inadvertently, when downloading a piece of software, download a piece of malware. If you're not scanning regularly, you might fail to identify those. 41% of small businesses and 47% of large businesses suffered a data breach as a result of virus infection in the last 12 months. And 28% of the organizations who had suffered said that it created very serious disruptive impact on the organization. As attacks migrate to hacking the humans, so you have to train people, which means you need a user education and awareness program, and you need to not just teach people about information security when they join the organization, but you have to continually update their knowledge so that as new hacks evolve, they're able to get themselves up to date and maintain that level of awareness of them. You don't want them inadvertently clicking on a phishing email because you didn't tell them that the nature of phishing emails had changed. You also need to have adequately trained security staff. You need people who are going to be capable of ensuring that your information security, your cybersecurity posture is up to scratch, and that means qualifications like CISSP, CISMP, and the like. You also need people who understand how to manage and audit an information security management system. Qualifications like CISLI, CISLA, CISA, those types of qualifications. 54% of organizations sadly see their own staff and contractors as a greater threat to data security and computer systems than outside attack. So trained staff, that also means trained staff who are working from home. You need to have adequate home and mobile working policies which ensure that staff know how to look after data at home, know who's allowed to access work devices, know what to do with company data when they're at home, know what to do about malware in the home environment, know that perhaps significant others at home shouldn't be allowed to use the work laptop to access gaming sites, know that you shouldn't be downloading confidential corporate data onto the home computer. All of those are part of dealing with staff, mobile staff, and working at home. 33% of small organizations haven't yet taken steps to mitigate risks associated with people working with mobile devices. Mobile devices, of course, also includes things like USB sticks, and so you need a policy that controls mobile and removable computer media. How do you make sure that when staff download data onto a USB stick, the USB stick will be secure? Well, you make sure that you only allow staff to use an encrypted USB stick. Of course, you should be making sure that laptops are boot encrypted from the outset. All laptops are likely to have some level of personal information on them, and lost or stolen laptop that enables an attacker to access personal information is likely to lead to regulatory action and or fines. So appropriate encryption, malware scanning before allowing connections to your systems. Interestingly, only 50% of large organizations have implemented a meaningful mobile device management policy, and very small numbers of organizations have trained staff on the threats they have to deal with. Dealing with threats is fine, training staff is fine, but you also need to make sure that users don't have privileges inside the network that they don't need to have. And privileges means not just what applications and information they can access, but it also means what rights do they have. Do they have the rights to write to particular files and folders, or only to read it? Do they have rights to delete information, to update information? And the basic rule should be that the number of privileged accounts is limited only to those that you have to have, and special privileges should only be granted to those like system administrators as and when they need them, not by default. 36% of the worst security breaches in the last 12 months were caused by human error. An error or attack can, whichever way it comes, amounts to some form of an information security incident, and responding quickly to information security incidents is part of building a resilience capability inside the organization. And that means developing and putting in place processes that will enable you to identify and respond to incidents. You need to test them, and there needs to be a good link between your incident response plan and how you escalate that into a full business continuity plan. If you have a major data security breach, a major denial of service attack, for instance, that could be so significant that it takes core business processes out, which might need to trigger aspects of your business continuity plan. And so cyber resilience is an increasingly important way that organizations think of addressing the combination of cybersecurity and business continuity. 91% of large organizations had a malicious security incident last year. Therefore, having an information security incident response policy and tested procedure is a fundamental requirement. How do you make sure it all works? Part of your governance regime is ensuring that not only are you regularly testing, but you're monitoring security, you're looking for evidence of attacks, you're continuously scanning for new vulnerabilities. Remembering that if 85% of breaches took weeks to discover, that's not where you want to be, because the amount of data that can be exfiltrated in that period is significant. 20% of organizations were unsure of whether or not they've been attacked. And if you find yourself sitting in that environment where you go, I'm not sure if we've been attacked, actually you probably have. You've got some bad stuff on your network right now. So what does it cost to deal with cybersecurity? Difficult thing to answer because it depends on your current level of information security inside your own organization and your risk appetite. How much you're prepared to invest is part of your risk appetite, but the average global cost of a data breach in 2012 was $136 or £90 per record. And so if you have a compromise of, let's say, 10,000 records or 100,000 records or some millions of records, it's very easy to compute the size of the breach. According to the PwC survey, for a small organization between 15 and 30,000, and for a large organization between 110 and 250,000 pounds. So I would say that it probably makes sense to spend certainly no more than 30,000 pounds as a small organization or 250,000 pounds as a large organization on average to make sure that you don't suffer the breach, because of course you make the investment only once, you avoid the multiple costs of the breaches being repeated. And so how much does it cost depends on what damage you think you'll suffer in 2013 without taking appropriate steps to protect the organization. For those organizations who recognize the need to deal with cybersecurity, the usual way to do it is to start with some form of cyber health check. And this might or might not lead to building the case for ISO 27001, but what's much more important is cybersecurity than certification to a particular standard. So a 2-day basic health check, and this is something which IT Governance as a company offers and delivers for its clients and has done over the last couple of months on a consistent basis. It's an on-site and remote cyber health check which goes through 4 specific standardized steps. It's a very fast basic health check. This is basic in the sense that it's high level. It's not a detailed assessment of every aspect of your security. It's an assessment at a level which enables you to talk to the board about what's working and what isn't. So step 1 is to identify what the key risks facing the organization are. That involves looking for the key digital assets, including personally identifiable information, looking at the most likely cyber risks to that information, and then taking account of both the organization's risk stance. And some organizations are cautious, they want to avoid risk, others are much more aggressive and much more open to risk. And whatever is your organization's risk stance is appropriate to you, but taking account of that and taking account of the contractual, regulatory and business requirements that might already exist for you around managing cyber risk, we then try and pull together at a high level again how you think you're dealing with the risks that exist. That pulls together what information security or cybersecurity policies and procedures you have in place, takes a look at the competences you currently have in place for cybersecurity, including staff awareness and understanding of what's going on, and the business requirements for information security management. And we can then do an audit of how effective that is deployed. And there are a number of things we look at. We look at understanding of policies and procedures across the organization, partially through doing an online staff questionnaire. Primarily, it's a standardized questionnaire customized for each client, but it gives an awful lot of information about staff understanding of critical policy and procedural issues. We look at the state of websites and perimeter security, and we cover each of the 10 steps that I've briefly talked about, so that we're able then to analyze the gap between how you think you're mitigating risk and the reality of what you're actually doing in terms of processes, people, and technology. So it's a high-level piece of work, but out of it we can prioritize what you need to do next. We can give you an action list with a high-level cost-benefit analysis. This is the order in which you should be addressing things. This is where the benefits should come, and if it's appropriate, contextualize for how ISO 27001 might be able to help you as an organization put a backbone of internationally recognized cybersecurity best practice into your information security management system. So for most organizations, a logical next step is to call one of our security advisors on our main telephone number, which you see there on screen, 0845 070 1750, or from outside the UK, it's international code 44845 070 1750, and talk to one of our security advisors about how we could conduct a cyber health check for your organization. As I say, it's a 2 to 4 day exercise with a price which is designed to be affordable for everybody. It's about as fixed price a health check as you could ever hope to find. Call us now and we can help you with that. And ladies and gentlemen, that then brings me to the point of question and answers. You could treat it as a workshop if you want to, where you're welcome to raise any questions that you've got around cybersecurity risks, issues, how cybersecurity might be approached. There is the dashboard on the GoToWebinar. You can use that for posing questions, and I'm just going to work through them. And we have a few questions around sound, and then we seem to get over it. What is the recommendation with respect to mobile devices policy? And the answer to that question is, first of all, that you should have a mobile device policy. Your big issue is whether it's going to be a bring your own policy where people use their own mobile devices or not. You need to, if it's a bring your own device policy, then we would usually recommend that you focus on those devices which you support, and you build into your policy a requirement for users to sign up to the fact that you can remote wipe information from their devices when they're lost, that you can segregate on their devices confidential commercial information from other information, and that you can require things like encryption and password protection. If you're allowing people to use, if you're issuing people with work devices, then you build those kind of requirements in from the outset. So that's the recommendation around bring your own device policy. As I say, do answer questions if you would like to. Do ask questions if you'd like to, either through the chat function or through the question function in the screen. How frequently should we be conducting testing and monitoring, and how should we do this? You should be testing websites and internet connections with a penetration testing regime on at least a quarterly basis. You should be either recruiting and employing your own qualified penetration testers, or you should be contracting with a penetration testing organization to do that and to provide you with a report quarterly on the state of security. And a good report would include identification of what vulnerabilities have been identified, and guidance on how to mitigate or fix those. You should be conducting internal penetration testing between every 6 months and once a year to make sure that there are no new vulnerabilities deployed on your network. How will we know if we've been breached? There are a number of ways that you can know if you've been breached. It includes, but it usually requires you to be monitoring what's going on. So, for instance, you need to have network monitoring tools which tell you about large volumes of data being gathered and exfiltrated from the network in ways that are not expected. You might find that you've got unusual patterns of data leaving the network. You might find you've got unusual quantities of data being stored in odd places on servers and then deleted later on. All of those are areas that might be indications that that you've been attacked and that somebody's taking advantage of the breach. Certainly, if you find odd things happening on your network, like applications not working properly, you'll be able to deal with. You'll be sure that you've got those as problems. The best way to raise staff awareness is staff awareness training. You can deliver staff awareness training either through a regime of classroom training or alternatively through e-learning. E-learning is an effective automated way of delivering a consistent message to everybody in a consistent way, and having a solid audit trail which tells you that tells you everybody who's been through the training course, and you can tie an exam to it, which enables you to track which people have done the exam and how well they did with it. What security measures should be taken for data stored in the cloud? Well, the starting point to answering that question is to make clear the point that it's still your data wherever you store it. And so the issues of where is cloud going to be secure, you have to address. And you can address it in one of 3 environments, and it depends on whether you're getting a service on a software platform or infrastructure as a service basis. Each one of those, the trust boundary is slightly different. So if you're getting infrastructure as a service, you'd expect the provider of the infrastructure to deal with all security issues in relation to the infrastructure, but you'd be responsible for it in terms of the middleware application system and data. If it's just software as a service, then you expect the supplier to take care of security at all 3 levels: infrastructure, platform, and application. But it's your data, so you're going to want to see that they have appropriate controls in place to protect your data. You'd probably look for ISO 27001 certification as a starting point. You might look for an ISAE 3402 or similar statement on controls that will tell you that you've got appropriate security controls in place and in operation. You might look for evidence they've deployed controls from the cloud controls matrix. A copy of the presentation should be available to everybody who's been on the webinar. I believe we send that out, or a link to it is sent out automatically. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we're coming to the end of questions, but please do, if you have any more questions, you can ask them through the chat function or through the question and answer function. And in the absence of any more questions, I think I'm going to go with no more questions. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for having been on our webinar this afternoon. I do strongly urge you, if you're not already cyber secure, to take all appropriate steps to all of those appropriate 10 steps, or those which you haven't yet taken, to get secure, starting with getting the board behind the effort, and make sure that you don't become a statistic, you don't contribute to the statistics, but you're able simply to get on with pursuing your normal business successfully. Thank you all for being with us this afternoon.